Hello again, friends. In the message that I shared with you recently, I was talking some about our Quaker process and sharing in our business meetings together. I'll tell you that in planning that message, I had a lot more content than I was able to include in the ultimate message that I gave. In fact, I ran over the time limit that was allotted to me by about a minute and a half, even with what I did give you. So I should thank, first of all, Jamie and Anna and anyone else at First Friends that helped to get that message to you, even though I ran over the time limit. In my efforts to cut down and try to reach the time limit, there were a couple of big chunks that I cut out of what I had hoped to share with you. So this is an additional sort of supplemental bonus material video just to share with you a little bit of the content that got cut out of that earlier message. You'll remember that in the message I talked to you about sharing in monthly meeting or our business meetings and how important it is for us to hear from everybody who has something to share, who has a leading. I talked some about a discernment process, about when to share, and I talked also about the importance of not going around after a meeting was concluded and doing things that undermine our business process by sharing with other people outside of the meeting things that you were not comfortable or not able to share in the business meeting. The sections that I cut out or saved for this bonus material were a little bit about the ways in which we listen and speak to one another when we're in those meetings, and I hope that this will also be helpful to you. And it's basically titled, Listen with Love, Speak with Love. I want to emphasize that really what we bring into our business meetings together in Quaker Process is a love and respect for everybody who's in the process. As long as we're able to speak to one another with love, we're creating safe spaces for everyone to share. And when we're listening to one another with love, we're creating safety within ourselves to be able to speak with that same love and create those safe spaces. So when I talk about listening with love, I'm talking about several things. The first is a really focused and intentional listening process, where we're really deliberately focusing on what someone is sharing, opening ourselves to receive their message, and not coming to it with our preconceived ideas that create blockages or prevent us from really hearing and appreciating what they have to share with us. We have to foster within ourselves an openness to the movement of the Spirit and leadings of the Spirit within the meeting. I think I spoke some earlier about really, turning off our inclinations towards really trying to think through a problem and try instead to pray our way through a problem, open ourselves to the Spirit, invite Spirit in, invite Christ into our business process, into our own hearts and our own minds as we try to discern together. But not only openness to the Spirit, but as may come to us directly as a leading, but also openness to the Spirit operating through others, openness to what others are sharing and how Spirit may dwell within their sharings. We can't be really open to what someone is sharing if we're spending the time while they're speaking planning what we want to say in response or what we want to say in retort to them. Instead, we have to release those preconceived ideas, release our own sense of ego that may be invested in what we have to say or in winning and losing an argument or in whatever the outcome may be. Focus our attention fully on what someone is sharing with us and what we may be able to take from that leads us all towards a greater truth together. Listening with love also means we assume that one another comes to these discussions with the best good intentions. Good intentions for one another and good intentions for the meeting as a whole. I find that frequently when we get into areas where we feel some tension, where we feel some anger, where we feel some resentment, a lot of the times those are rooted in assumptions that we may have about what somebody else's intentions were or what's on their heart. I heard an example. I can't share the details with you because it's a sort of confidential matter. I was not given permission to share the details or the specifics, but I heard an example recently about a meeting or discussion that some people were in where one person used a particular phrase and another person thought that in using that phrase they were being specifically targeted or spoken about. And other people in the meeting had a different interpretation, that maybe it was being used in a different way, just as a turn of phrase or a common colloquial expression. By jumping in, the person who felt hurt, we don't want to deny their feelings, but they weren't specifically called out by name. They just inferred that they were being spoken about. and never really went to try to clear the air with the person who said it, and wound up carrying around that sort of hurt feeling, but something that was never intended. So when we start to assume or infer what's on somebody else's heart, or what they're trying to express, or what they maybe their intentions are, without really actually hearing from them, frequently it leads to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. In assuming somebody's good intentions, that they're bringing their best intentions to the discussion and to the meeting, what I'd like to focus on is look for the love that they're sharing. Because most people in our meetings are speaking from a place of love. Even when it may feel like they're speaking from a place of anger, or where they're passion about an issue, usually those same things are rooted in some kind of love that they have. And that's why a lot of times in the meetings that I'm in these days, whether it's monthly meeting or committee meetings or other things, I really try to focus on and reflect back to the participants in the meeting. I see how much you love First Friends. I see how much you care, and the amount of energy and time that you're putting into this is a reflection of that love. As long as we look for the ways that people are sharing their love, that will help turn our attention away from looking for reasons to feel hurt by what they may share. But if we do find an occasion where we feel hurt by somebody's words, it's really important that we don't just harbor that feeling. Because if we keep it kind of covered up, more than likely, at best, it will kind of stay with us for far too long. At worst, it may grow, it may fester, it may become even worse. By hiding those hurt feelings, we just we give them more power. We essentially feed them. So the better thing is to find opportunities, if you feel that hurt feeling or that tension between you and another person, to go to them and say, hey, this happened, we had this discussion, and I really didn't feel good about how this went on. Can we talk about it? Can we work through this and work it out together? As long as we're coming together in a spirit-filled, worshipful community, we should be able to have those conversations with one another. If you find that for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable having it as a one-on-one conversation, then look to one of the elders, one of the weighty friends in the meeting, and ask maybe if they will join along with you and that other person to have that conversation, to help that conversation, so it can be a healing, positive conversation for both of you. Because if you hold on to it and don't express it, you've lost an opportunity to talk about it. You've lost an opportunity for both sides to grow and improve and to heal. And this whole community shares in not wanting you to be hurt in our business process. We want you to have opportunities to heal those wounds, to grow together, for us to feel continually knit in our process together so that we're closer to one another. And the community not only wants you not to be hurt, but wants to have an opportunity to help in healing those hurts. And finally, of course, by not speaking it, by not sharing it, by not bringing it to light, all of us lose the opportunities to say, if we made a mistake, if I made a mistake, to say, yeah, I messed up, and I'm going to learn to do better. If that's the case, I know that I speak for myself, and I'm sure many of the rest of us who would want to have that opportunity to recognize how we may have harmed you and to grow past it if we can, to improve ourselves and do better for you and for I and for all of us. Another one of the messages, I spoke in the last one, I said this is a part of the message that's especially important for me to talk to myself a little bit, because all of us are growing in these things together. Another area where I feel like I need to talk to myself a little bit and remind myself is that, different people have different styles, different modes of communicating their ideas, different ways of sharing with one another. And we really have to be attentive to the idea that just because somebody has a different way of expressing their ideas, that doesn't make their ideas less valid or less valuable to all of us. For myself, I'll just take myself as the best example for this. A lot of the times I've been told I talk like a lawyer. I don't know why that might be, but that's how it is. I kind of express myself in ways that are in part defined by my professional life. So if somebody else is expressing their ideas in a way that is organized differently from how I might organize them, or operates on a different emotional wavelength, something like that, I've found that it's harder for me to really appreciate and understand what they're trying to express to me sometimes. So somebody that's expressing themselves in the similar way that I do, I feel very comfortable, and it's very easy for me to take in that content. So the first step for me is to be able to identify that as an issue. It's one that I'm just increasingly learning about is, oh, I see what's happening here. It's not that they're saying something that's, strange or weird or crazy or whatever. It's just they're expressing their ideas in ways that are just different from mine, and I need to switch modes a little bit, or at least open up a little wider to listen in the way that they express themselves. I need to find ways to recognize that that's a communication style bias that I have, and then to work around that bias. But the first step is always to recognize it, but then once upon recognizing it is to engage with it and work around it, work through it. The other area where I find it's helpful to work on that type of issue is to really prioritize the content of the message above the tone of the message. Because I think sometimes, for me as an example, when somebody is expressing an idea and they're expressing it with a great deal of emotion or a great deal of passion or big excitement, that can feel intimidating sometimes, even if it's not anger that they're expressing. Sometimes it's just excitement or just a real strong investment. It can feel a little intimidating. It can feel a little off-putting for somebody who operates in a different emotional space from that. But if I can turn that off and say, well, set that aside for the moment, note it, they're very excited. This is something that matters to them. This is something that's important. But focus instead for the moment also on what is it they're saying? How can I receive that message? In addition to noting their emotion, their tone, their level of concern, as I turn from that, can I look also at the content independent from that and really take that in and incorporate that into my own discernment and my own prayerful consideration of the topic at hand. So it's important for us to listen to one another with love. It's also important that we work towards speaking to one another with love. And I've noted a few specific sort of areas to work on for that. These are things that I try to do, I hope, and I hope that each of you are trying to do them as well. Try not to speak in ways that close the door to other people's sharing. And what I mean by that is, express your ideas, your leadings clearly, but don't say them in a way that is so final or so definitive that it doesn't leave space for anyone else's input or anybody else's sharing. Because some people may feel like, well, it sounds like it's already a done deal. A decision's already been made by somebody, and my input's not welcome. So make sure that you're expressing yourself in ways that leave plenty of space for others to share their input as well. It's also important, I know this is one that we've talked about before, but it's always worth reiterating. We share to the center in our conversations. That is to say, you speak to the group, you say, well, I want to share with everybody so and such, whatever your leading or idea is. You don't address yourself to a specific individual, especially if you're sort of snapping back at somebody who's already shared something. It can feel very targeting. It can leave them feeling very hurt. It can take something that's an us discussion and turn it into a me versus you discussion, whether you intended to or not. So even if you may be responding to something that somebody else has already shared, you might say, well, I appreciate what was shared by so-and-so. Affirm them, even if you're maybe sharing a different point of view. I really appreciate what was shared by so-and-so, but I also want to share my view that such and such, or whatever it may be. So, you can express how your idea fits into the larger conversation, but you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you're barking back at somebody, retorting to someone, starting that kind of one-on-one argument, or even really addressing that person individually, because if you're just addressing them, you're cutting everybody else out of the conversation. Speaking to the center, speaking to the sharing with the group, avoids those kinds of one-on-one confrontational types of communication. And then finally, an extension of that idea is whatever it is you may say, is to focus your comments on the ideas, the substantive issues that are in play, not to focus on any particular individual over unduly or too much. Focus on the overall discussion and how your ideas fit into that broader context, so that we have an idea we can all share in that deeper discernment together. So thank you, friends, for taking the time to watch this supplemental additional video. I hope you find it helpful. I really appreciate the opportunities that I've had as your clerk to be working with you and meeting at First Friends, and I look forward to our next meeting together.